Hello, this is Unexplained America, and I'm your host, Lisa. This week, our episode covers 3 people that went missing in 1973. Now, it would take around 48 years for them to actually find out what happened to them, but eventually they do, and that is the good thing. Now, little business, you can join the Patreon to get a load of extra bonus episodes. So check the show notes for the link to the Patreon. There are about 15 to 20 bonus episodes that are just on the Patreon, and that helps support the Patreon or support the podcast. And then you can go to unexplainedamerica.com to check out merchandise, connect with me, and join me on all social medias, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. So yeah. And it's super helpful if you leave a comment and a 5-star rating and subscribe. So I'd love for you guys to do that. So in 2016, a team of firemen were conducting a dive training, and they find a car sunk in the Kentucky River. Now, they would make a find that would help to bring family members answers. But let's start at the beginning. So on Friday, August 3rd, 1973, 57-year-old Martha Smith Helmick and her sister, 52-year-old Flora Smith Helmick, were invited to travel with Flora's employer, a John Edwin Keyton. He went by Ed. Now, he was 81 years old. The plan was for the 3 of them to drive from Bridgewater, Virginia, which is a very small rural town very close to the West Virginia state line. They planned on driving to go stay with Ed's brother Leroy in Kentucky that night, and then to attend a family reunion in Ohio for Ed the following day, and then return back to Virginia Sunday or Monday, like the following week, okay? That was their plan. Now, a little background on all 3. So Martha and her sister Flora were born and raised in West Virginia. Their maiden name is Smith. I cannot find much about their early lives, but I did find a confirmation that when Flora was 19 in 1940, she was listed in the census as an inmate, quote unquote, in a children's home in West Virginia. And I did find another report that does state both women were raised in an orphanage. Now, by the time Martha was 25, she marries a 59-year-old widowed Eli Helmick. Now, they marry in 1942, and then in 1944, at the age of 24, Flora marries Eli's brother, Virtus Helmick. So now we've got 2 sisters married to 2 brothers, okay? Yes. Now, Virtus, just like Eli, is much older than Flora. He was 49 to her 24. So both sisters married to older brothers, and they actually reside together, like they all live together. Now, it looks like in 1945, Flora gives birth to a son that they do call like Virtus Jr., but he does not make it. He does pass away as a baby. It doesn't appear that Martha and Eli had any children together, but Eli had 5 children with his first wife, Sally. And again, he was 60, like right at 60 when he married Martha. Now, in 1965, Virtus, who was younger and married to Flora, he does become sick. He goes into the nursing home, and he does pass away. And this happens, in 1965. Now, in 1973, in June, Eli passes away, and he lived to be a very nice old age of 93. That's amazing. Now, little background on Ed. So Ed Keyton, he is born in 1892 in Virginia. He is John Edwin Keyton. There isn't tons on him either, but I did find some items on him. Now, in 1917, it says he does enlist in the Army, and he was sent to fight in World War I. Now, in October in 1918, he is listed as wounded in action severely, so severely wounded. He was actually in France, so stationed in France. He was fighting, and he does lose his left leg in a battle. Now, it's said that he is awarded the French and American medals of being a hero of war and for being able to point out an enemy's nest while being shot at. So he was actually, not just injured, but injured in combat and injured doing something amazing for, his side. So he is kept in hospital to recuperate. Of course, he loses a limb, and he is actually released in March of 1920, and he's honorably discharged and declared at that time to be 75% disabled, from the military now. So he will go on disability, and he is a disabled veteran, and he will have those benefits for life. Now, he does go back to Virginia. He is considered a war hero, of course, and is stated to be shell-shocked by the war, and perhaps kind of not the same when he returned. Now, in today's time, diagnosed as PTSD, going through all that he went through and more, and of course, being disabled and such. So, now he does return. He actually marries a woman named Bertha in December of 1920. So the same time he comes back, he meets Bertha, they get married. They end up having 5 children over the course of the next 17 years of their marriage. Now, Ed, according to legal records, he deserts Bertha in 1937, and she actually files for divorce, but it is not final until 1940, and it states that it's based on desertion. Census does not reflect Ed having a job in the 1940 census. However, the divorce paperwork refers to him as a mechanic. So I don't know if he was working off and on or working when he could. Of course, he is disabled, so he does get, some type of benefit. I don't know, obviously how much. A little side note on Ed as well. So Ed is deemed by the Rockingham County Circuit Court to be incompetent in 1932. So this was during his actual marriage. He is married to Bertha when this happens. He is appointed a committee person to see over his affairs. So that's a little side note. Now, evidently, Ed takes on Flora to work with him as a live-in housekeeper around 1967 after she loses, her husband, Burtis. Ed was described by people as difficult, but then people described Flora as being extremely good-natured and patient, and evidently the only person who could easily deal with Ed. This was coming from people, interviews, and such. On that Friday, August 3rd, 1973, Ed and Flora actually go to pick up Martha, who lives in a small mobile home nearby, and they're all in this Bridgewater, Virginia area. Now, it's said that Ed had picked up a Social Security check for around $50 right before they left for this trip. Now, this trip, according to today's Googling, would take about 6 hours and 33 minutes. Again, this is today's time based on, I'm sure, certain items in certain ways. So who knows? Let's just say it took 7 to 8 hours back then based on those parameters and not having maps, not having Google route you the fastest way because they're using just maps and no GPS or anything like that. So let's just say they should have been arriving to Ed's brother's house by 7 or 8 o'clock that Friday night, in that ballpark range, okay? And that time of year, it still obviously would have been fairly daylight, at that point, so to speak. So, or close to it, maybe dusk. Now, the 3 never make it to Kentucky. And it's not exactly clear who did what or reporting, but Leroy, who would have been receiving the 3, they would have contacted all of Ed's family friends, and they would have gotten in contact, with his court-appointed people. And then Martha and Flora, of course, had family in Virginia. So someone in the family after not hearing from the three, they go to the Bridgewater Police Department and they file missing persons reports. Now, I'm just going to state what was in those reports, and not to be kind of redundant, but just to kind of give you guys an idea on that, okay? So it does show, and this was what was reported, this was what's being circulated in 1973. So it shows Martha Smith Helmick. It shows a picture of Martha of circa of 1973. It says that she went missing August 3rd, 1973 from Bridgewater. She is considered endangered missing. It lists her age. It lists her height as 5 feet and then her weight at 190 to 200 pounds. Distinguishing characters were listed as Caucasian female, gray hair, brown eyes, and no teeth. Now, clothing / jewelry, all it stated was she had red sneakers. So that would have been something that stood out, probably especially at that time. Now it says details of disappearance. So it says that Martha was last seen in Bridgewater, Virginia at approximately 12 p.m. on August 3rd, 1973. She was accompanied by Sister Flora, Flora's employer, John Keyton, at the time. They were driving Keyton's light green 1967 Ford Fairlane to a family reunion at the home of Keyton's brother in DeBolt, Kentucky. Now, the event was scheduled for the following day, and Keyton and the Helmick sisters never arrived and have never been heard from since. Now, Keyton, Keyton was not a good driver in 1973. He had been at least in one accident and received many traffic citations. His driver's license had been taken from him, but he continued to drive. Some theorized he, Martha, Flora, died in a vehicular accident in the mountains of Virginia or Kentucky. If so, their remains in their car were never found. A search turned up no sign of the Helmicks or Keyton. Martha usually sent postcards to her loved ones when she traveled, but none of them heard from her after her disappearance. Their cases remain unsolved. So it lists the investigating agencies, the Bridgewater Police Department has a phone number for people to, call. So this is what hers described. Now, Flora's had all that same information as far as the date. Now, Flora it shows her picture. It says, endangered missing, 52. Now, she is also listed as 5 feet tall, 190 to 200 pounds, Caucasian, gray hair, brown eyes, pretty much the same. She does look different from Martha, but they do look the same. It says her nickname is Flory. It does say Flora is mentally disabled and has difficulty speaking. In addition, she injured her back in a car accident a year prior to her disappearance, which would have been that accident that they mentioned, the details of just disappearance, and which is exactly the same listing as Martha's, by the way. Now, I will say, okay, now John's sheet, of course, it's pretty much exactly the same as the women. It does list him as endangered missing, shows his age, lists Caucasian male. Keyton goes by the nickname Ed. His left leg is missing, and it says he is illiterate. And I will say this keeps on coming up, but in the census, it does say that he can read and write. I think that's interesting. Now, medical conditions, it says Keyton is a dependent adult. So this is all it lists about Ed. This is the information, and as far as everything else is the same on all three. This is all that they have to go on. This is all the information that goes on. There is absolutely nothing appearing in newspapers on the three of them. Around that time, evidently, it wasn't widely broadcast, them being missing. I know that they are adults. It was said that Ed did have the tendency to travel. He would sometimes go away, but he would always resurface. So he never went away for months. Now, again, absolutely nothing appears in the newspapers, but not until January of 1974. And again, by now, it's been 4 months since they went missing. Now, the police, of course, are investigating. The missing persons reports are circulating. But as far as any media attention, there appears to be just none, okay, going on as far as media attention. And this is the actual title of this early news article from January of 74. And I'm not even joking, but the title of it says trio of characters in quotation marks, by the way, drives off, thought dead. So this is what this article's title is. Now, in the article, the writer begins by stating the three that have gone missing were, in quotation marks, unforgettable. When describing the three people, they state Ed as gruff-talking, one-legged World War I veteran, Flora as a tongue-tied housekeeper, and Martha as a 200-pound woman wearing red sneakers. Like, this is the description in this article. I couldn't even make this up. Then the article goes on to interviewing Mrs. Ruth Kegley, and she is stated to be the last person to see the three alive. So she's the one that reported them last seen at noon on that Friday. Now, she states, quote unquote, from the article, okay, John was hateful. Nobody could stand it around him unless they understood him. And he was a wicked talker. He cussed almost every breath. Now, Ruth does state she knew Ed to travel to Kentucky. Like, she says that he would go there. Again, his brother lives there. And he would go, now she says he would go the route of White Sulphur Springs, West Virginia. And we'll kind of discuss this a little bit later on. Now, the article does go on that the police fear the three are dead and that the explanation is that Ed's 1967 light green Ford Fairlane plunged off the side of a West Virginia or Kentucky mountain road. That's what they believe to have happened. The article goes on to discuss how they all felt like Ed took back rural roads because of his lack of being a legal driver, like he didn't have a driver's license. They do discuss his driving record, which we notated in the missing persons report, and the fact that he got into an accident a year ago on a different trip to Kentucky, and that was the trip that Flora was on that she had gotten hurt, okay? So she had been with him. Now, it does mention the explanation of going off the mountain would explain why the car wasn't found yet by hikers or hunters. So, again, this is January. It's been 4 months. No one has seen or heard of the car. No one saw the car on the side of the road. Like, there's just been absolutely no sightings of the car, and people have been driving through these routes. Beatrice Simmons is interviewed, and Beatrice is a sister to Martha and Flora. Now, she states she feels like something bad has happened because Martha would always send postcards on any trip she went on. You know, again, we're talking about adults, so people in general were thinking the three just went off on a jaunt, you know, and others pointed out that they didn't have enough money to be gone for 4 months. So, again, that they're kind of feeling like something has happened. They have no idea what, but they know they didn't have much money. No one has seen or heard from Martha and her normal usual with the postcards. So there's just certain things. And then also, so Ed's appointed guardian at that time was a man named George Price. And he states that Ed was, you know, known to go away for a few days, but he would never miss any of his Social Security checks or his VA checks that came in. Like, even if they were a minute late, he would always be calling the VA for him. He was always there to collect his money. After all of that unkindness in the article, it does end with kind words, at least. So Mrs. Kegley states she would give anything in the world to know what happened to them. People say just forget it, but you cannot forget a thing like that if you have a heart. So this is this article, and again, this wasn't in the media. This wasn't like a media attention grabbing missing persons like it is today, with at least we have like the silver alerts, you know, for people maybe of this age. So, you know, and of course we have social media followings and that kind of thing, but this just wasn't a high alert, you know, and they were adults and they were just thinking, okay, well, they'll show back up, and then they never did. So years and years passed with zero sign of Ed, Martha, and Flora. Nothing. And eventually their belongings are sold. Their families are left wondering and just longing for answers. There's just nothing. There's They have no clue what has happened to them. Let's fast forward to 2016. So on Saturday, October 22nd of 2016, the Lexington Fire Department, they were conducting a training exercise in the Kentucky River on Old Tales Creek Road, which was near this Valley View Ferry. So this is kind of the point. This is very rural. Now, this area was an intersection of counties. It was Fayette, Jessamine, and Madison counties. And this training was a dive training. So they are diving into this Kentucky River right there. The divers come across two vehicles in the river. They are about 20 to 30 feet from the shore and a little down from the ferry. And I will post a picture of the map because I think it's interesting. I'm one of those people I kind of like to see like where this was, and we'll kind of talk about this. So one of the vehicles was an intact 2001 Dodge Ram four-door pickup. And they'll find out later that this vehicle was reported stolen in 2002. So this was almost a brand new vehicle. And of course, they're finding it in 2016. So someone just stole it and ran it into the river. Now, the other vehicle near the Dodge Ram was not intact. This vehicle will be identified as a 1967 Ford Fairlane. Now, they get the front half of the Fairlane out of the water. Like they get the Dodge, and evidently when they're getting the Dodge truck, it kind of, because the Fairlane was so old, it kind of broke into those two pieces, okay? So the front end comes out first of the Fairlane, and upon coming out of the water, firemen find what appear to be two human bones in this 1967 vehicle. And again, it's very rusty. It was very clear to them that this vehicle had been in the water for a long time. And of course, they're like, whoa, what are we finding here? This probably kind of was a, oh my goodness moment, okay? So they get the other half of the Fairlane out of the water, and the fire department immediately contact the Fayette County Coroner, Gary Ginn. It's Ginn or Jen, to see if these items are truly human, because they know that they have found bone, okay? So Ginn confirms they look human, and then he contacts and connects with a retired forensic anthropologist in the county that he knows, a Dr. Emily Craig. And he takes the bones to her. She confirmed, that day, this is high priority, and she confirms the bones to be human. Now, the towing company is a Roberts Towing. They get all the parts of both vehicles, out. So on Monday, the 24th, Ginn and his deputies meet with the Lexington Police Department, and they look over the other parts of the vehicles, like the end part of the Fairlane, and they find several long bones and foot bones inside of an actual pantyhose. Now, these items appear to be wrapped in fishing line and fabric. I guess whatever this kept these bones intact, like this material. Now, they place these bones collected into evidence envelopes. Now, they continue on the 25th, breaking apart all the pieces of the Dodge Ram and the Fairlane, because they're trying to ensure they do not miss any other bones. And they do not find any other bones, okay? Now, on October 26th, they go back out to the dive site to search for any other evidence or clues to see if there's any debris or more bones. They look along the shores and they dive as well. Now, this search goes on for several more days, okay? They're trying to ensure that they get everything possible collected. And this search, of course, involves the Lexington Fire Department, dive team, who originally, have found the vehicles to begin with. But also, of course, the coroner's office is involved, and then the Lexington Police Homicide Department is involved, and forensics. They also have involved the Dodge, the Dodge Ram being stolen. They have the auto theft department involved, and then they have the retired anthropologist, Dr. Craig, involved as well. So all of these people are helping in this effort. So this is obviously a big to-do to find human remains that are obviously high priority and possibly old. So all hands on deck, all departments on deck. Now, they do find a purse and a car seat on October 29th. So like I said, they're still searching. Now, on November 2nd, after many more attempts at the riverbed and kind of all around the shoreline and everything else, they have found numerous vehicle fragments. They find a full bench seat. They find the auto floor of what would appear to be the Fairlane's auto floor. They find 2 radiators, a rear view mirror, a steering column, a shoe. They find vehicles, carpeting, and then the dive team decide to discontinue the search after this point. Because again, they've been diving since the 24th, and this appears to be the entirety of what they're going to collect. And this is a collective and collaborative joint investigation to try to figure out, what is going on, what happened, human remains of it all, okay? Now, on November 9th, Coroner again notifies the National Missing and Unidentified Persons System at the University of North Texas. And they let them know, hey, we have found bony structures, and they're going to coordinate sending specimens to get a DNA profile. So that's what they're working on immediately. Now, Dr. Emily Craig, she will determine the first 2 bones were found are foot and ankle bones. So that was in the front part. Now, the other bones pulled out of the other half of the Fairlane were a femur, 2 radius, and a ulna bone. Now, Dr. Emily Craig is also able to kind of state that the bones appear to be female. So that is what they do know. And then they do also, she is able to state that there is a fractured tibia. So that also is something that they're focusing on when they're looking at missing persons case, which they are doing simultaneously. In fact, Captain Chris Warren, the fire chief, he is fully invested in this case. He states that fireman, it was his job to keep people safe, and that he felt like he needed to bring this family closure. He really cared about getting a positive, return on them finding these bones. He felt responsible. So he is diving in himself and looking at all missing persons cases. Okay, so he does actually look at one missing person out of Ohio that kind of had they were missing, they had a similar travel pattern, but they are able to get that DNA extraction. That National Missing and Unidentified Person System, they go by the acronym NamUs. So they are able to put together a DNA profile, and that came back inconclusive to this missing person out of Ohio. Captain Warren is still diligently working, and of course, they do know they've got this 1967 Ford Fairlane, so it needs to be a missing person case from 1967 forward. And then also it's a female is involved. So in July of 2018, Captain Chris Warren, he actually comes along an internet search of a missing persons report from Bridgewater, Virginia. And in this report, it talks about the 3 individuals traveling together from Virginia to Kentucky. He contacts the Bridgewater Police Department and obtains actually a DNA sample from a 3rd generation niece of Martha and Flora. Okay, so they get this and they send this off to the NamUs for comparison. Now in 2018, the DNA comes back inconclusive. Okay, so there's just, at this point, when it comes to, in general, the ancestral quote unquote DNA, the technology is just not quite there. It's getting there. He is still looking at this, okay? He's still feeling like this is the person. So in February of 2020, Coroner again, he actually directs the NamUs company to send the DNA profile and the bony structures that they had to a different DNA labs, the DNA Labs International in Florida. So he wants them to do this DNA extraction like this lab in Florida has had has had some luck in this. In June of 2020, Cornergen directs the DNA Labs International to send their more in-depth DNA profile that they put together to the Parabon Nano Labs for additional profiling to be compared to that third generation niece profile. Okay, so they've collected hers. So the samples are unfortunately compromised in the shipment. So this is June 2020. So they still don't have answers, at this time. So they're, and again, they've got all this other collective evidence. A little aside, and something that wasn't even in the initial missing persons report about Martha was that she had evidently had a fracture that was never set when she was younger. And so she did have a little bit of like a limp, like she had to wear a corrective shoe. So actually the sneaker that was found, those red sneakers, they were corrective shoes. And so when they were looking at the bones, like Dr. Craig could tell that there was some type of fracture. And so Captain Warren knew that from talking to Martha's family. So again, they're really feeling like with this other evidence, and this is why they're really wanting this DNA evidence to match up with what they're knowing in all the other respects. Now, finally, in November of 21, so they have now resent the samples. Remember, they were damaged samples. They've resent the samples. And finally, the Nano Labs comes back and states that there is a definite match between, this third generational niece's profile to the bones that were found in the Fairlane. So now they can definitively say, yes, this is Martha in the vehicle. This is the vehicle. Now we know what happened to three of them definitively, that they did end up going in the Kentucky River on the route. Now, they do hold a press conference shortly thereafter in December, and this is 2021 now. So it took, they found the remains in October of 2016, and it took this time. And they do, of course, Captain Warren is absolutely thrilled. He has spent hundreds of hours on this case, but he was very thrilled, very diligent. Just, it meant a lot to him to be able to bring justice. And they do release a statement that firefighters frequently encounter people on their worst day. And though we try, we can't always create a positive outcome. Now, we encountered Miss Helmick because of her worst day, meaning Martha's remains. Though we couldn't make the outcome better into quote-unquote traditional sense, that didn't stop Chris Warren. He found a way to still provide a service for her and her family. And they stated they couldn't ask for more from any firefighter. So this was the statement put out by the fire chief, Kristen Chilton, in 21. It was super exciting for after all this time for this case to become solved. Of course, Captain Warren and then Cornergen. So Martha's family, Martha and Flora's family, they remained unnamed, but they did want the remains brought back to Virginia, and they did. Actually, Captain Warren and Cornergen did it themselves. They carried Martha all the way to Virginia, and it said that she was going to be buried by Eli, by her husband. So that's what they were going to do. Now, they never, ever found the actual remains of Ed or Flora. Of course, likewise, they at least know what happened to them, but with just the fact, it was just amazing that some of Martha's bones actually survived the water for that long of a time. There were only like a few bones found, and the current and everything else. Now, I love this case because there's at least a beautiful outcome on this. And that was intriguing because I can't imagine having a family member, they leave to go on a weekend trip and they never come home. And so this was very awesome, forensically awesome, of course, to be able to track down everything and put this together. So that mystery solved. But it's just very intriguing. But I do think something else that kind of gives chill bumps here, okay? So, of course, Mrs. Ruth Kegley, way back in 1974, when she was interviewed in that article. So she actually stated at that time, and this is wild, I cannot help but believe they are in a river somewhere, and that is why the car has not shown up. Like, oh my goodness, is she psychic or just a practical thinker? Again, she was the one that notated route that they took, which would have taken. So, I mean, if you're looking at this on a map, it's kind of like Bridgewater over to Kentucky. It's kind of a straight west, but with the roads and with the mountains, you either have to go kind of south and then over or north and over. And so it makes a difference. Like if you're looking at it in a traditional sense now, if you used Google Maps, so to speak, it would take you like kind of south and over. Well, it looks like their route was more north and over. And so the route that they took, the fact that Ed was staying away from certain thoroughfares, probably the main highway, he was not doing that. So it's just interesting that he ended up taking that route. So just to kind of give you guys an idea, so where they ended up in the river, and again, by today's standards or by today's technology, they of course wouldn't go that route. But anyway, they were about an hour out from being at Ed's family's home. So it kind of looks like, and again, they had gone north and over. So they had actually come south to get to their locations. They were about an hour south or north of where they were supposed to be. Okay. And this is, who knows what happened to them or how it happened that they got in the river, but it probably got dark on them. Ed was clearly didn't have a good driving history. They called him a bad driver. They called him a reckless driver. He had been in some accidents. And so who knows if he got fatigued on the mountain roads, but they were literally only an hour away from their destination on the road, just to kind of give you guys an idea. If they even knew where they were, I don't know. I'm sure they had maps in the cars. That's what you did back then. But yes, so just an hour out. They had gone probably 6 hours, had been on this 6-hour voyage and only had about an hour left. So it is a sad case, but then it is a very fulfilling that answers were given to the family after all this time, and just amazing that forensics and this DNA technology is here to help in these instances. So it's just truly amazing. It's truly unexplained sometimes, but I'm glad this was explained. It was unexplained for 40 plus years. So thank you guys for being with me in this case. Let me know what you think. Leave me a comment. 5-star rating would be preferred. If you have any cases that you want me to look at, just feel free to reach out to me. You can comment. You can email me. Go to my website, unexplainedamerica.com. You have tons of ways to get in touch with me or go on the social media. So thank you for listening, and I'll be with you guys next week. Bye.